Hello, David here. I'm here with Claire Khaw for something we've been talking for a while. She had a series of questions on Judaism, ranging on different philosophical, theological issues. And yeah, I've been meaning to speak with her anyways for a while, so a good excuse to stream. Thank you, Claire. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Excellent. So,
What time is it now with you?
it just passed 6 o'clock. I'm sorry. I was doing actually physical labor today, so
Oh, right.
I switched shirts and
What sort of physical labor?
moving. I do property management, so I hadn't been planning to stream, but I'm glad you asked me. So it turned out I had time, but I wasn't dressed or prepared, so I just popped on. Figure let's do it. Pop on the stream. See, maybe some people will show up, and we'll get through these questions.
Brundlefly's here.
Yep. I tweeted it. Are you on Twitter these days?
No, I've been thrown off.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
Maybe I'll get my account back after the midterm elections. Maybe.
And did you participate in anything Jewish over the Jewish holiday season?
I guess I just listen to the lectures and kind of follow whichever part of the Torah you're supposed to be following.
Well, obviously we finished it and restarted it, and that's the simplest Torah celebration at the end, where we finish the last book of Deuteronomy and then restart the beginning with Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
I posted some of that on my YouTube page, but it's fun celebrations. But is there anything you want to say? You want to jump right in?
Well, I guess you posted all my questions, so I almost feel redundant. but obviously I'll ask you to clarify certain bits that I don't understand.
Yeah, I thought we'd go through them just one by one, starting at the beginning, and I'll try to timestamp it after the video, so people will be able to jump straight to the questions that are interesting to them if they don't want to watch it all the way through. Yes. Did you have any comment on current news or politics you wanted to say first?
Well, I mean, apart from Kavanaugh, and well, it's still an ongoing drama. All the missiles are still being dodged and hurled, and these days I find myself not listening to any British news at all, because it's all so predictable and boring, and sort of permanently tuned into American news, just because it's like a soap opera.
And did you watch the big fight Saturday night, Khabib and Conner?
I only heard about it. So no, I don't know. Cage fighting is so, I don't know. I prefer proper boxing rather than kind of no rules and kicking and no. So I didn't watch it. Did you watch it?
I mean, you had to pay for it, but I saw it right after it happened.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have access to it anyway.
I thought maybe your secular chronism, the mayhem that happened afterwards, if you followed it, obviously the person who won's a Muslim from the Chechnya region of Russia, and attacked someone afterwards, and he might lose his belt, he might get a huge fine, he might not get paid, but to him, the protecting of his religion and country was worth it. So after the fight, he attacked the guy's manager, and there was a big brawl, if you heard about that.
Yes, I heard about that, and then it sounds like they're both in trouble.
He mentioned Islam.
Or just a Muslim guy.
Yeah, I mean, he almost blatantly mentioned Islam as part of his motivation. He's like, look, I follow the rules, I'm a respectable person, but this guy who insulted my father, my religion, and my country, and to him that was more important than the $2 million purse and possibly the belt, and getting suspended from the league to defend the honor of his people and religion.
Well, I hope it doesn't. They don't take it too far. I suppose a bit of that grandstanding is kind of normal, I suppose. They want, maximum viewership, and they want to turn it into some culture war thing. I mean, what I noticed about some Muslim YouTubers was that they immediately streamed about it, as if it had anything to do with anything, really.
Well, it didn't.
But
Saying
then
like,
I suppose they were saying, well, the Muslim guy was always being, mocked for his religion, and he thought he'd get his own back. But honestly, I didn't watch any of it, so I don't know.
I was just interested talking to you about the Islamic overtones of it, to saying like he came into the West and he defeated our best guy, and then afterwards said like your belt and your title and your rules mean nothing to me. I don't care about the millions of dollars. He was willing to throw that all away in order to defend his honor.
Well, I don't think it's.
It was like a noble Islamic.
I don't think it would be approved of, I suppose, by wiser heads. It's just sort of young people grandstanding and using their religion, which I suppose, people have always done when they fought wars. It's like, my God is better than your God if I win the war against you or the fight against you. So I guess it's kind of like that. But I don't think God, if he exists, would interest himself in, in these sporting matters.
Well, I don't care about the sporting matter. I was making the only point about kind of the identity, where the person on the Islamic side is willing to reject money, reject fame in order to defend his identity, as we're like on the West, that would not appear to be the case. And even his opponent, was like, no one could understand why he did it. But from that, well, of course, he insulted his religion, he insulted his people, and the millions of dollars and the belt and the title were secondary to that, which like everybody commenting on the West, doesn't seem in the nature of Islam, where he came in and beat our best guy, and then basically said F you to our rules and our system, and you could keep your money and your belts and whatever.
Did he say that after?
He didn't say those words directly, but some of the connotations of what he said. He opened and said like, that's not the kind of guy. He's a respectful person, but this guy insulted my family, my country, my religion, and my people. So he had to do what he had to do.
Right. But is there some threat of the prize money being withdrawn or something?
Yeah, it has been.
It has been.
Well, he might still get it, but it has caused him to not get it immediately. It'll be under the Nevada Gaming Commission's control to oversee it. That the Federation, Dana White, and the fighting UFC don't actually control that. That's controlled by a governmental or regulatory body in Nevada.
Well,
I mean, to me, it was praiseworthy of Islam, and saying like, I don't think I was a terrorist or something like that, but you're just saying that to stand up and throw away all the fallacies of fame and honor and money that the West offers, in saying this fight wasn't just about entertainment and making money. This fight was for real.
Right. I mean, I got the impression that they were quite friendly before, or there were some pictures that suggested that.
No, I mean, definitely.
They were always sort of being really nasty.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know the issue too well, but I thought it might be related because personally, I kind of gained respect for Khabib in that. I mean, like obviously, like I don't support violence, but just the fact that he was willing to reject all of the glamour that the West is offering for his identity.
Yeah. No, I did sort of read up about it, but because I didn't watch the thing, and there was some suggestion that Conner was sort of at some time being quite reasonable or something, but no, I probably don't know what I'm talking about, so ignore everything I say.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, it's not worth the time for me to explain to you the history and the whatever, but it was just connected because the guy openly is very Islamic and praised Allah before the fight and after the fight, and almost used a lot to explain his actions afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right into your questions for Judaism. So you want to explain the origin of the development of these questions, or saying if you've looked into converting, or your history with looking into Judaism, why you have these questions, how you develop them, what type of questions that you've asked in the past, who you've asked them to, what type of answers have you gotten from other rabbis?
Well, I suppose I've always thought that there was a pattern to the development of the Abrahamic faiths. So obviously it started with the Jews, because it had to start somewhere, and Jews were the chosen people, and they, out of all the people in the world, would have a certain duty to do something. And it has been said that Jews suffer for the sins of the Gentiles. So, or that there are also a metaphor for humanity and human nature. And I think you have a duty to kind of, be the light of the nations, and it's sort of, if you don't do that, and then then the other nations will stumble and fall and blame you. So if you don't kind of maintain minimum standards, or at least remind the Gentiles when they're not doing things right, then you're going to suffer. So the impression I get is that you're not supposed to assimilate. You're supposed to be different, even isolating though it is. And what Jews mustn't do is assimilate, because they'll still hate you, even if you do, because, well, it's just a way, I suppose. And if you assimilate and you become liberal, the Gentile already has problems with his own liberals, and they will hate all the more, foreigners who come in and, take the side of the liberals when they're trying to maintain conservative values. So I think that's always been the problem. And of course, it's always harder to be conservative and stick to all the rules, and then then you have the liberal lot who are always wanting to let their hair down and things hang out. And so I guess even within the Gentiles, they're just sort of more liberal Gentiles than there are conservative Gentiles, and of course the same with Jews, because it's easier to assimilate and or try to have the best of both worlds than to be strictly Orthodox. So,
I think I'm asking you something different.
Dilemma.
Let me ask you: do you mind if Brundlefly comes on real quick? He just wanted to say something. I'm not sure if he wants to.
Oh, that would be lovely to have him.
Okay, yeah. I do want to get through the questions, but I wanted to know kind of like your lead into Judaism. Like, did you think of converting to Judaism? Have you spoken to rabbis? It's a societal, theologically, where you're just considering maybe Judaism is the true religion, or is it more politically, like, who are the Jews? Who are these people? What's the origin of their thoughts, and what kind of rabbis have you already attempted to ask these questions to? Jewish leaders or rabbis? Have you gotten answers on these questions?
I suppose I like the ultra-Orthodox because they're very clear about these principles, so you kind of know what they're on about. The Reform are a bit.
I'm asking you personally, if not just your opinion on Jews, but it's like, did you look into converting at some point? Or
yes, I did. I considered it, but I suppose it was really more a way of.
When you're saying you considered that you at some point you wanted to be a Jew, and you looked at the process of becoming a Jew, and
yes.
Maybe you decided the negative, or maybe it's still open that you maintain it's possible at some point in your life that you'll actually become a Jew, but you have looked into that.
Yeah, I have looked into it, and where I am is actually the strictest place to convert to Orthodox Judaism. So I should actually be living in America, and then I would have an easier ride.
mean, you spoke with Greg Johnson earlier today. I saw him, and you have affiliation with some extreme critics of Judaism. Is that relay like at some point you're like, oh, I'm thinking of becoming a Jew, but then you're worried about what about all these extreme critics of Judaism there are, and that's held you back, or is it more like a truth thing where you want to know if Judaism is true or not, and if it's true, you want to become a Jew regardless of the consequences, and if it's not true, you don't want to be a Jew regardless of the benefits? Or was it more like social, where you were just thinking like, who should like joining a society, and you figure you'll join the Jews, who are pretty good, international, powerful, intelligent people?
Well, I suppose I'm sort of for reasons of snobbery, I suppose. That might be one of the reasons, but really, I was sort of more looking into it as a way of promoting secular Quranism. So that would, it's like I would make more of an impact promoting it as a Jewess.
So I mean, we're going to start with the question straight with the laws of Noah, but I mean, to your understanding, when you say secular Quranism is a means towards an end, and the end is kind of like the redemption of the fallen state of mankind, and it's just your concept that secular Quranism is somewhat similar to the 7 mitzvahs of Noah that will perfect society?
Yes, that it is in conformity with the Noahide laws, while unfortunately Christianity is idolatrous.
So let's let Brundle joined us. So unless Brundle wants to stay for the
hey, Claire. I just want to say, Claire, I think you're much prettier with your face covered.
Thank you.
That was a joke.
It's not even my face.
One thing about the Noahide laws, though, is, and forgive me if I misunderstand you, but your secular Quranism is separate from any kind of faith in God, and the Noahide law is predicated on this is God's law. So it's not just a code to live by, like it's commanded by God that people live this way.
Well, yes, but you can't really command belief. You can only command obedience, outward obedience to certain laws. So ultimately, your own state of belief is between yourself and your maker. But for societal reasons, obviously, it would be, perhaps it doesn't matter why, say I don't kill you or rob you and do horrible things to you, as long as I don't do it. And maybe that's all we should care about. And
but I think
people
sort of need something more.
Yeah, and they have a choice to believe in God, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. For myself, it's 50-50, isn't it? He might exist, he might not exist, he might help us, he might not help us on a particular day. And I guess if we really feel the need to pray to God, then we wish him into existence and we ask him to help us. And I think that's probably enough to ensure good behavior, provided the laws are already in place. And if the laws are in place, then belief will come.
Yeah, see, and Duvid, maybe you could weigh in on this too, but see, I see your approach as so utilitarian, and you're sort of trying to like rationalize religion and why people behave the way they do, when these are really like fundamentally like irrational aspects of human nature.
Well, the thing is, I want to approach it from a totally rational viewpoint, because I know that most people are, in fact, atheist. So, there's no point going around saying, "Oh, but you must believe in God. Surely
statistically, that's incorrect.
And annoying.
Certainly in the U.S., atheism is substantial. I think less than 10%. I'd say, like in the U.S., 80% of people believe in God. 50%, like 80% of the U.S. believes in Jesus. Like 90% believes in God. Like not in only like 2 or 3% are atheists. Maybe like 10% are agnostic.
Yeah.
And I don't know about worldwide. Maybe in England, the amount of atheism is substantially higher, but I can't imagine that atheism is higher than like 15-20% in England.
Then why are the Democrats so powerful? Surely Democrats are atheists, really.
We had this argument the last time you talked about it. Yeah, I mean, Democrats believe in Jesus also, and saying liberals, they have a different understanding, a different take.
Yeah,
and
they focus on the social justice version of Jesus.
Well, it's like African Americans. Like African Americans have one of the highest church rate attendance and some of the strongest belief patterns in the Bible and Jesus of any people in America. However, they're also, usually favor abortion, gay marriage, and solidly on the left.
But what is the point of saying you believe in God and disobeying His laws? It's so insane.
You're internally arguing theology already to say that people believe in a loving God that doesn't focus so much on punishment, but they still believe. You're saying if you don't, you're talking about the love and fear God. People could love God, but not fear God. So you say, yes, these people believe and love God, but they don't really have this fear instilled in them that they think there's extreme punishment coming for improper action.
Yeah, they think they're going to heaven either way.
At all. It doesn't even make him agnostic.
And and the thing is there's also, sort of what I would view as a misinterpretation and a corruption of the idea that only God passes judgment. I mean, yes, He's the only one that can pass judgment on your soul, but that doesn't mean we can't judge others for their behavior. But the Democrats and a certain strain in the West would say, like, we pass no judgments. Like, I live how I live, and I can't say anything about how anyone else should behave. And that's fundamentally like the Democrats' approach to social behavior.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. If that's what they want to do. But if they claim to believe in God, and the God that they claim they believe in has taken the trouble to make these laws, and these laws are in the Bible, and every home has a Bible, it just seems extraordinary to say, they're no longer in force. It doesn't matter. I know it happens in the UK where you've got priests who saying, everything's fine. Anyone can go to heaven. But it's so obviously not true.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so easy to point out to them that it can't be. It's not logical. Why would God go and make all these laws, 10 commandments, and then just say, it doesn't matter anymore. You'll be forgiven, whatever you do.
Yeah, but can we pause this for a second, Claire? Because I want to, at some point, we're just going to go straight into theology. But since Brundle's here, I wanted to ask him about his thoughts on the Khabib Islamic connotations, and also about HeelTurn. Then when that's done, then we'll just kick straight into theology and then into the questions. Did you hear that, Brundle?
Sorry, one more time.
If you had any thoughts on the Khabib Conner fight in the Islamism versus the West, where he basically came into the West, beat our top guy, and then said "F you" to the system.
Yeah,
you keep your belt and you keep our money.
It was definitely a microcosm of the Muslim invasion of Europe. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he thumbed his nose. He expressed a willingness to commit violence at some sort of, for trash talking, essentially, something that so fundamental to combat sports. I mean, it's frankly a show. You know what I mean? I mean, in the one sense, it's about selling tickets. In the other sense, it's about hyping oneself up.
To him, it wasn't a show. To him, it was defending the honor of him and his people.
Right. He it's like he just doesn't get it.
And that's why the West, God forbid, we're going to lose this battle. You know what I'm saying? It's us that don't get it. To us, it's just entertainment and a show. And to him, the money and fame doesn't matter. It's war. And to some extent, that's why we're losing the battle, because, we're the weaker opponents that aren't training as hard and aren't as hungry.
Well, in the sense that we imagine that he's playing the same game we are. I mean, we could do our own thing, in a sense. Like, we don't have to include someone of his attitude and, still enjoy ourselves. Like, it's the naivete that, thinking that he's, thinking about it the same way you are.
Yeah, but what comes down like when our discussions about defending the wall is saying like you guys aren't that good, like these guys are going to defeat you in battle and war, like saying that this whole concept of yours is not really working, and chances are if the war happened, it's kind of indicative to say like we may not win.
Well, I think, David, I think like kind of where we're from, like urban areas, sort of where men have become much more effete than they are in the South and rural areas. I mean, there's still much more of an honor culture in the Deep South and in Appalachia and places like that.
Dana White and Conor McGregor are basically Zog, and you're saying,
hold on.
Okay, but maybe we just make. I want to get the main focus of the show is these questions, but on HeelTurn, it thought like you don't have a good narrative arc in that. Like you're just like a random white dude who married a Jew who has a few strong opinions on a few different issues, but you don't really have a good narrative arc in terms of that, and that's why I think the chat tore you up. Although you might be able to talk intelligently about a few different issues, what people do know about you, you really tore you up. You got to develop a good narrative.
Well, but they tear me up. They tear me up. That audience tears me up for the same reason they tear you up. Well, they tear me up for my association with you, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Like that audience is engaged in like cultish behavior. I mean, it's like.
No, it's like he said about Mike Enoch, that when he found out Enoch had married a Jew, he felt betrayed, and that's why he doesn't even want to take the chance with you, saying and to say like you're tainted to, you can't be a spokesman for white causes as married to a Jew, and that you should just you shouldn't even attempt to. So it's not. Of course, you have affiliation with me, and so and you can't really do anything but play both sides. That's why. My original attacks on you, you're not going to successfully be a white advocate married to a Jew.
Well, it depends like how you define white advocacy. Like in the most virulent counter-Semitic circles, yeah, of course not. I mean, there's guys even, it's funny, I think you found it, that Goys in the Hood like played your debate with Stryker and they commented on it. I saw you in the comments of it. And, I mean, those guys,
like one comment they said you could tell from the hesitancy of my voice that I know we're effed, which is somewhat true. Like I mean maybe because I fear God, but like the guy was kind of called me out on that. It's like you could tell from the hesitancy and the way this guy speaks that he knows they're screwed.
but those guys are basically, I know those guys, and they're very representative of the kind of people in the chat that just like, shred me, throw epithets at me and all that, right? They can't even, like, they can't get past it, but they're such a small fraction of people. They really are so small because, like, even within HeelTurn's audience, there were people that backed me up. You know what I mean? There are people that watched Luke Ford that backed me up. There are people a lot of people watched my show. You know what I mean? Like,
you need a better narrative arc. I mean, that's my message. You need a better, and it's saying obviously you don't want to be doxxed. It's not safe for you to let your audience know your identity, but within that boundary, and maybe that'll make it impossible. But what's your narrative arc going to be for who is this person who's supposed to be shedding light on these issues?
See, I feel like it's already been defined. It was defined, at least for this circle, the moment I showed up on Luke, because the whole point of me going on Luke in the first place was to sort of get off my chest.
You're just the guy who married a Jew and had a kid before you were red-pilled and now don't know what to do. And still, basically, like that's your narrative arc.
It is
on that, and it's like, well, okay, and then you're not even like Mike Enoch because you already have a kid that thank God we heard in the background, Mazel Tov.
Right.
But okay, that was my comment on that. If you book more shows and
actually, so look, in November, we need to talk because I'm going to do a week-long series of shows, and I want you to basically be a big part of that. I want to line up quite a few conversations. Like, I think somebody in the chat was just saying you versus E. Michael Jones. The guy that was booking the Brundlecast just booked E. Michael Jones for HeelTurn. We could get E. Michael Jones. I could probably get David Duke if you want to talk to David Duke.
I mean, it was never one of my like ambitions in life, but I would do it. But like, I mean, I'd say like I never had the ambition. That's not like I'd rather be. It's just the randomness of the web that. But no, I mean, I don't think that's. I can't say I want to do that, but I would do it if it was needed or called upon.
All right,
I'd
well,
like
we'll
to
figure
do
it out.
it.
You'd like to do it?
I'd like to do it. Yeah.
I could probably look. We could probably get a panel together with David Duke on it, or
I would do a non-personal philosophical debate where I would defend the position that Jews are good for the West and over any point in history where we could argue thousands of years of Western European history from his supposed ancestor Charlemagne to modern day America. And I wouldn't make any personal attacks. It would just be my opinion that Jews are, although we might have faults and done bad things, but our benefit to society vastly outweighs the negative. So something like that I would happily do, or if it was just a random discussion on something that.
No, we could definitely look. I mean, I think it's actually a great topic idea, and I will get that pitched. Or
if you wanted to narrow it to like one specific era, where
if there's anyone else that you are interested in talking to, I mean, either on that show or someone else. I mean, I know I just messaged Ethan Ralph today about like a couple hours ago about following up on this Jay Dyer thing. I mean, I'm sure that can happen because Jay Dyer, as you know, like publicly said he would do it. So,
and me and him actually have areas of interest. I mean, I don't really know these circles. Like, if I know their name, it's from like Luke Ford or from you, or watching JF or something like that. But yeah, I'd rather be talking about more, Freemasonry theology.
Yeah. No, I think
or even Christianity. The historical Jesus, is Jesus the Messiah type, or science related. Like the JQ is something the
JQ. I'm not trying to do. I mean, the JQ's been done. But
I guess E. Michael Jones, is that his name? He's a Catholic, and that's something I do in real life. I talk to Catholics about theology constantly, almost daily.
Yeah, so I think that would be a good one. Jay Dyer is obviously going to be a good one. I mean, people are always in the chat throwing out Duvid versus this, Duvid versus that. So maybe we can look into that, help facilitate that, and of course, who knows? Maybe for old time's sake, we could do Duvid versus Norvin 3.
Yeah, maybe you need someone to say the hardline positions. If he's still around.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he might be done with us, but that would be his loss.
Okay, so
yeah, I'm gonna hop off. I got to go take care of him. Claire, nice to talk to you. Duvid, we'll talk. Thanks for having me.
Talk soon, Brundle.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Okay, Claire. So before we jump into the 7 mitzvahs b'nai Noach, and it's interesting, there's not actually going to be a positive commandment to believe in God like there is to the Jews. There's only the negative commandments related to that. But your understanding to say that if people don't meet a certain standard, you're popping them in atheist camp, as opposed to saying like the ambivalence of people that have different forms of level of belief, that you seem to have this cutoff point, and if you don't meet that point, you're an atheist.
Well, no, I mean, it's sort of, I see the Noahide laws as a kind of minimum standard of morality. Okay, so we know that it absolutely forbids idolatry, doesn't it?
Well, we're going to get into it, so let's just jump straight into the questions then. So I put in the chat. Do you have the chat open?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to ask the first question?
So, well, according to Rabbi Schneerson, he says Jews have an absolute duty to enforce the Noahide laws, and they have to do it, by force if necessary. That was what he said, or through gentler means. So this is kind of what you guys are supposed to be doing for us.
So, okay, so I put it on screen share, and I'm going to put this up so everyone could see this, and then we'll discuss. Almost all the questions you asked are pretty complicated, and there's no definitive Jewish answers. I mean, it's something like, do Jews believe in Jesus or something like that? Almost very few Jews believe in Jesus, although there are some, and generally that goes against the principles of Judaism.
But what does believing in Jesus mean? I don't suppose Jews actually deny the existence of Jesus. They're just saying he ain't
that
God.
Jesus was the Messiah, or even it'd say God, or even the Messiah. And even did Jesus even exist? Do they believe that he even existed? And but he's saying, if you ask is Jesus the Messiah? You could say, according to Jews, pretty clearly, most Jews are going to say no, the vast majority, as opposed to the questions that you asked. A lot of them are pretty distributive among Jews, where there's a vast array of opinions on these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you say, okay, what the Rabbi Schneerson or the rabbis, you talk about American liberal Jews or Israeli demographics, to say that obviously most Jews don't follow the opinions of the rabbis and have more liberal or political opinions that aren't necessarily in line with what the sages say, but that might be into account, that you could understand the distribution of Jews and how they look at the issues, even if it's not in accordance with the sages.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably, Jews probably have a disciplinary problem, because with Catholicism, if you're a bad Catholic and you've done terrible things, you get excommunicated, and there used to be a facility for doing this to Jews, but then in the diaspora they forgot that, or it sort of fell into disuse. So there's no way of disciplining bad Jews and saying, no, you're not one of us anymore because you've done these things, or something like that.
Let's go straight into the laws of Noah, and I have them up here, 1 through 7, if you want to read them.
Okay. I mean, I've got a different version.
I just put up Wikipedia, but any version's fine. You can read your version.
Wikipedia version. So, the 7 Noahide laws, as traditionally enumerated, are the following: 1, not to worship idols; 2, not to curse God; 3, to establish courts of justice; 4, not to commit murder; 5, not to commit adultery or sexual immorality; 6, not to steal; 7, not to eat flesh torn from a living animal.
Yeah, so the first thing, because a lot of people ask me about, Hare Krishna, and I'm somewhat of a Hindu, and I just had videos yesterday on the local Hare Krishna temple, and you notice that in the 10 commandments to Jews, there's 2 different commandments. There's, you shouldn't worship, you should have no God besides me before you, and you shouldn't make graven images. So the question, when it comes to the 7 laws of Noah, it says not to worship idols, as opposed to forbidding graven images, and that's why Hinduism is disputed. Say, okay, is Hinduism within the 7 laws of Noah? And the first one, worshiping idols. So if a Hindu told you that they don't worship the idol, even though they serve the idol, they have idols in their statue, they still have some sort of monotheistic belief. So that's an internal dispute, and a lot of these are established in different way. But you notice that there is no positive commandment, according to the Noahide laws, to believe in God. They're all negative, besides establishing a court.
Well, but this thing is so obvious. It's like, if you're just doing anything that resembles praying, but anything an idol that looks like any material thing, then you're obviously guilty of it.
Well, I'm saying that there are nuances in that, and I just wanted to point that out. That so the forbidden is not to worship idols. It's not necessarily forbidden to have idols, or to have ceremonies and idols, or to make graven images of different things. That's not part of the Noahide laws. necessarily. It's just the concept of worshiping idols.
Okay, so if Hindus say we may appear to worship idols, but we're not really, or they might say, well, for the common people, that's what they need to do. They're very materially focused, and they just need to concentrate their thoughts on something. But we're not really idol worshippers, they might say. And I suppose even this sort of excuse. Or this evasion kind of legitimizes it, because the sort of saying, well, yeah, we acknowledge we're not supposed to be doing this sort of thing. But with Jews, with your 13 principles of faith, it's very, very clear and very strict. I mean, to the extent that Spinoza, the pantheist, was regarded as a heretic for saying.
But so you're missing the quick point that I made, that there's only 7 laws that the God of the Jews binds upon non-Jews. So the laws that are binding upon Jews are not binding upon non-Jews. So Spinoza breaking the laws, he was a Jew, he was bound by those laws. Non-Jews are not bound by those laws.
But Jews are to forbid the worship of idols.
Technically, we're saying Jews are not forbidding the worshiping of idols, and saying God himself in Genesis makes these laws for all of mankind. And let's see if it brings down here.
But perhaps we can discuss why idolatry is so bad. I mean, is it obvious
it comes
to
from
you?
Genesis in Genesis 7:20-28, that when Noah came out, that Noah and his sons were given certain commandments by God, and Noah is the progenitor of all of humanity. So it's saying your ancestor Noah received these laws from God, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the Jewish people. And saying had God went on to choose the Jewish people and give us Torah, that has nothing to do with the fact that all of humanity was commanded these 7 laws.
Yes, because I mean the whole point of idolatry. Perhaps this point is made clearer in the Quran, because it goes on about not worshiping idols, and one of the things, a constant refrain is that if you worship idols, you're doing something that is completely pointless, because these things of stone and wood will neither help nor hinder you in any way. So what you're wasting your time and energy worshipping these things, and worse, you may fight each other over the methods of worshipping these useless things. And really, why not worship this idea of omnipotence and supremacy, and omnipotence,
Well, it's just from the internal
and perfect morality, and even if you don't believe in God, these concepts are really something to be considered and contemplated. And I don't think you even have to believe in God to see how all-encompassing these ideas are, and how wasteful really it is to worship any idol. Although I can understand the appeal of it. I mean, I come from such a background where idol worshipping is, the thing.
I'm just trying to give you a perspective of saying, as someone who's considered joining the Jewish people, there's a difference when you stand before the God Hashem of the Torah as a Jew, and as a non-Jew, you're judged according to different standards.
Mm-hmm.
And as a non-Jew, you're judged according, so to say, the 7 laws of Noah, which is
lower standard,
a more basic standard, and a non-ritualistic standard. And I mean, you could consider it higher or lower. I mean, you could consider it lower, but it's not necessarily that. I'm saying you have more freedom. That's why I was talking about the establishing a court and a system of justice where you could have different nations that develop in extremely different ways that are within the 7 laws of Noah, and without getting into the interpretation of idol worship, what is idol worship? Is Christianity idol worship? Is Hinduism
Yes.
idol worship?
Yes.
And these type thing, which is disputed among Jews. And in saying if you're looking for
Well, those who are just being polite, really. I mean, you know full well it's idol worshipping, but maybe you don't want to tell
Well, I'm saying, are you
the
from the
dominant
sages?
race because they
Claire,
might
are
get
you
mean.
from the sages?
What?
Are you from the sages?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So I was saying your opinion on the matter doesn't matter. I mean, so we have sages that have spoken on the matter, and it's saying it's not a question for the average person or even your average scholar. You say only the sages have spoken on this opinion, and
Which sages say it's okay to worship idols?
wouldn't say to worship idols, but to say whether Christianity is a form of idolatry, which is a dispute among the Hebrew sages.
But since when?
Since it's Christianity's inception, since for like 1900 years.
Okay, so I know that during the Middle Ages, or
We could do a
perhaps
separate
after the Inquisition, Jews sort of thought, well, we're not going to keep calling these Christians idolaters because we know what they're going to do to us, and if we say these things, they're going to torture us and kill us and persecute us, and really we'd rather not move again. So we'll just say that they're okay.
We're going to
Because
have
if we don't, they will get nasty again.
we're
And
going to have the problem of framing what we're talking about here. So we're moving in and out of. Let me just I have it on screen share. So let me just read this before we continue the discussion. So I could when you talked about Chabad Lubavitch would had a unique outlook in the 7 laws of Noah, and people maybe don't know this, that Ronald Reagan officially proclaimed the 7 laws of Noah to the Lubavitch Rebbe. The Lubavitch Rebbe was honored by 7 different presidents, although he never went to the White House to accept his award. The Congress made an official day celebrating Education Day in the honor of the Lubavitch Rebbe.
You're talking about Rabbi Schneerson, are you?
Yeah, and obviously you're in London. They're very big in London. There's probably 20, 30 branches of Lubavitch across England and all over the world. So do you want to read this statement by Ronald Reagan's proclamation?
Okay. Amid the distractions and concerns of our daily existence, it is appropriate that Americans pause to reflect upon the ancient ethical principles and moral values which are the foundation of our character as a nation. We seek and steadfastly pursue the benefits of education, but education must be more than factual enlightenment. It must enrich the character as well as the mind. One shining example for people of all faiths of what education ought to be is that provided by the Lubavitch movement, headed by Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, a worldwide spiritual leader who will celebrate his 80th, can't read anymore,
80th birthday on April 4th, 1982. The Lubavitch Rebbe's work stands as a reminder that knowledge is an unworthy goal unless it is accompanied by moral and spiritual wisdom and understanding. He has provided a vivid example of the eternal validity of the 7 Noahide laws, a moral code for all of us, regardless of religious faith. May he go from strength to strength. In recognition of the Lubavitch Rebbe's 80th birthday, the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States and Congress assembled have issued House Joint Resolution 447 to set aside April 4th, 1982 as National Day of Reflection. Now, therefore, I, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America, do hereby proclaim April 4th, 1982 as National Day of Reflection, and witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand this 3rd day of April in the year of our Lord, 1982, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 206. So it's interesting that Ronald Reagan uses the old school form in the year of our Lord, referring to Jesus Christ. And this page I have has a few collections of letters between the Lubavitch Rebbe and President Reagan. And this one here is from the Lubavitch Rebbe to President Reagan. And, it must enrich the character as well as the mind while reaffirming the eternal validity of God-given 7 Noahide laws with their ramifications for people of all faiths. You have expressed most forcefully the real spirit of the American nation. More than ever before, the civilized world of today will look upon the United States of America for guidance as behooves the world's foremost superpower, not merely in the ordinary sense of the term, but even more importantly as a moral and spiritual superpower whose real strength must ultimately derive from the unalterable commitment to the universal moral code of the Ten Commandments. Indeed, it is this commitment to the same divine truths and values that, more than anything else, unites all Americans in the true sense of e pluribus union, with prayers and wishes for success in carrying out your enormous responsibilities for the benefit of Americans, all mankind, and with esteem and blessings, quarterly M. Schneerson. And just so you see that there were multiple correspondence. There was a further proclamation in 1985 of National Education Day, where Ronald Reagan again reaffirms the 7 Noahide laws. And in 1986, Ronald Reagan reaffirmed the 7 Noahide laws, House Joint Resolution 582. And another letter from the Lubavitch Rebbe.
I've got a passage of
which
something
have
he
been
wrote.
the bedrock of society from the dawn of civilization, when they were known as the 7 Noahide laws, transmitted through God to Moses on Mount Sinai, is a clarion call vital to all mankind. And one last letter, just so you see that within American politics, that 7 Noahide laws are somewhat part of American culture. Some people might. I put it in the link if anyone wants to see that, the correspondence between the Lubavitch Rebbe and Ronald Reagan.
But I've got a passage by Rabbi Schneerson that I feel I should read, because he does express it quite forcefully. May I read it now? It's only very short.
Good.
So he wrote, Schneerson wrote, "We must do everything possible to ensure that the 7 Noahide laws are observed. If this can be accomplished through force or through other kinder and more peaceful means, through explaining to non-Jews that they should accept God's wishes, we should do so. Anyone who is able to influence a non-Jew in any way to keep the 7 commandments is obligated to do so, since that is what God commanded Moses, our teacher." I posted that in the on the right, so you can get all the references. It's sort of, I'm not really sure what it is.
I'll add that in the link in the chat. So, generally, the classic, Orthodox Jewish approach is say that the 7 laws are binding upon everybody from Noah, and that's independent of the Jewish people. That predated the Jewish people when God spoke to Noah and commanded these laws. So that is the 7 Noahide laws. Basically, God runs the world. God punishes the wicked and rewards the righteous, not just the Jews, but all people. And God's specific desire with the Jewish people is interconnected to the world, but God's desire for the world was made known to the nations through Noah. And Lubavitch had a unique take, which is similar maybe to secular Jews with Tikkun Olam, which also comes from the prophets, that it's our duty to be influential in this and go out and preach to Goyim, to have morals and ethics, and as opposed to on a private basis, say, okay, you should be a moral, ethical person. You should be a light unto the nations. They should see, look at this Jew and how he acts, and want to emulate, the Jew and recognize God through his people. However, the Lubavitch outlook on going out and trying to influence non-Jews in that manner was relatively unique.
So, and very missionary, which is not the Jewish way at all, is it?
Well, you could give a theological basis to it to hasten the coming of Messiah, to say we want Messiah to come, and you have a question about the temple being rebuilt, which we'll get to later, but saying in order to, according to the Maimonides, we have to bring world peace, and we have to have universal recognition of God, of the one true God, before we could rebuild our temple. So the Lubavitch Rebbe, saying he wanted the temple to be rebuilt in his lifetime and Messiah to come in his lifetime, and he knew that according to the sages, the way to do that was to have universal recognition of God. So he went out to preach to the non-Jews in order that redemption should happen in his lifetime.
Right. I mean, I always get the impression that, the end date is like the end dates happen when, things are so bad and you need a, Messiah to come and save us from all this degeneracy. And yet you're now saying that, when we're really, really good and nice to each other and everything, then the Messiah will come. I guess that's when, people would be not needing him to come. So I don't know. It seems a very ambiguous aspiration as to the conditions when the Messiah is supposed to come.
Yeah, because generally the sages said Hashem will control when Messiah comes. We believe in Messiah. We believe in redemption. The prophets clearly indicate it and talk about it, but that's not the main point of our religion. We have practices and laws and things that we do, and trying to bring redemption is theoretically part of our religion, but that's not actively what we're doing with our religion. As where Lubavitch took that as an active approach, that part of our religious job was in order to bring redemption, and might have more in line with Christianity and with secular Jews with like Tikkun Olam and Repair the World, where they're actively trying to change the nations and change the non-Jews. And so that's a theological battle. That's why I said there's a spectrum of Jews. You're not going to get a definitive answer on the issue. The majority of the sages don't recommend preaching to the non-Jews. They're saying like you should preach like through example and character, and to say that you're bounded, whether you ever met a Jew in your life, you're bounded by the 7 laws of Noah, whether you've heard of them or not.
Yeah, but the thing is that the Gentile already has 2 Abrahamic faiths to choose from, Christianity and Islam. I suppose it's my view that Christianity has sort of stopped working, and that's why, Islam just sort of looms before the West and in this rather frightening way. And I suppose, I'm suggesting that Jews have a duty to pronounce on which is more conforming to the Noahide laws, Christianity or Islam.
Well, I'm just trying to make you understand
one or the other.
I'm just trying to make you understand the theological belief point, is saying that God, as if a Jew believing in our religion, the God who commanded us in our religion is the God who controls the whole world, and whatever the relationship between us following our religion, Judaism, and the rest of the world, but that's the God we worship. And saying the question of the 7 Noahide laws is just what's our part in that, and saying maybe we have no part in saying God commanded the nations in these laws, you're bound by that morality, and that's not connected by the Jews. I don't need to convince you of the law. The fact, like I don't need to convince you the sky is blue. I don't need to convince you the 7 Noahide laws. It's a fact, whether you like it or not.
But if you haven't delivered the message, then you haven't done your job as being light of the nations.
Yeah, but
that's what you're supposed to be, isn't it?
The 7 Noahide laws are a fact of nature. God commanded that upon the nations before the Jewish people even came into inception. That's not my mission as a Jew to uphold the laws of Noah. The laws of Noah predate our laws and are bound upon all peoples without any validation of the Jewish people.
But they don't know about it, do they?
Well, they do, because it's in the Bible. Saying it's in the Quran. Saying secular Quranism is saying that both Christianity and Islam affirm the 7 laws of Noah. That's why they start with Genesis. They affirm the creation account. Both Christianity and Islam affirm the creation story of the God of the Jews in Genesis, and that account in Genesis clearly lays out the 7 laws of Noah. In the story of Noah, they're called the 7 laws of Noah because that's what God told to Noah.
Okay, but it's not, the Noahide laws is not a concept known to the Gentile, is it?
any Gentile who's ever picked up the Bible. I'm saying any Christian or any Muslim basically already knows the 7 Noahide laws because it's in the book that they espouse to.
But in a very hard to find way. It's only in the Talmud, isn't it, the Noahide laws?
No, it's in Genesis where God specifically commands unto Noah.
Right. I thought it was only in the Talmud. Did you know which chapter?
I had the verses up, but yeah, I mean, it's in Genesis chapter 7. I'll put it up in for you to read because I guess this is important.
I mean, the Jewish virtual library is quite good on that because it actually says, now I'll get there before I can read it out. The 2 separate sections.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, it's Genesis 9.
Right. Okay, so I'll post you the link so you know which one I'm talking about. So this is from the Jewish Virtual Library, and it says in the final
I'll read. Well, you were getting that right. I'm going to just read to you Genesis 9. That. And God blessed Noah and his son, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on the beast on the earth, and all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on the fish in the sea, that they are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food to you, just as I gave you the green plants. I now give you everything, but you must not eat meat that has lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood I surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting for every animal, and from each human being too I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply in the earth and increase upon it." Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "I now established my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, and all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I established my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I'm making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become flood to destroy all life," and so on and so on. But you're saying that covenant between Noah, between God and mankind at Noah, that's the source of the 7 laws of Noah. It's got nothing to do with the Jewish people. Did I lose you, Claire? It's like I lost Claire. She ran. I think I lost Claire. Let me see if she's there. It looks like she stepped out. She might have had a computer issue, but I got the link. So let me continue going with some of these questions and hope Claire will come back and look in the chat. I will put the Hangout link in the chat if anyone else wants to come on and discuss some of this. I was just trying to give a clear theological understanding according to the Jewish religion, what these 7 laws of mankind are, what's their origin, what's the nature of the bindingness upon all peoples in connection to the Jewish people, and what's the theological understanding of like the Bavitch or Tikkun Olam Jewish groups that do preach to non-Jews. But from the Bible, it seems pretty clear that this concept of these laws of Noah being binding upon all humanity are independent from the Jewish people, and both Christianity and Islam both support and hold by these binding laws of Noah. So, I mean, her first question from the one she'd put to me, is it a religious duty of Jews to promote the Noahide laws among Gentiles? So I said, generally not, although there are some groups that do, and saying we don't need to promote something that was already commanded upon God to other people, although we do promote ethics and righteousness and the brotherhood of man and so on and so on, but and actually preaching to non-Jews upon that, not necessarily. So would you agree that the duty to promote these Noahide laws among Gentiles amounts to a duty to ensure minimum moral standards in these countries, as Rabbi Schneerson said? So that, similar to the first question, is we promote righteousness and godliness. I mean, say, obviously Jews make up the largest percent of atheists in Western countries, and Israel has one of the highest rates of atheism in the world. So you're saying, like, when you speak on behalf of the Jewish religion, you're not necessarily speaking on behalf of Jews. Sizable element of the Jewish people oppose our very own religion, even though they might support our nationalism and our race. So these are very difficult questions to answer, and you have wide divergence among the Jewish people. Claire just messaged me her broadband went down. Let me see if she's going to be able to come back. I'm just going to go through these questions, see if she comes back, and at least have a video documented answer to them. And let me just, I'm messaging Claire on Facebook that that's what I'm doing. Okay, so I just messaged. Hopefully she'll be back. And so number 3, is Islam in conformity with the Noahide laws? And number 4 is going to be, is Christianity in conformity with the Noahide laws? And that's a pretty controversial topic. In general, Islam is in conformity with the Noahide laws. And the concept of, as we said, the basic laws, don't murder, don't steal, don't have idolatry, don't curse God, you don't eat the flesh of an animal. These are basic, simple rules that is not super difficult to be in conformity, and especially because Islam, the question of idolatry usually is the biggest one, because Islam is anti-idolatry and also forbids cursing God. Islam is generally in conformity with the 7 Noahide laws, and Maimonides even, it's supposedly written that you could, if forced by death, you could conceivably convert to Islam. And, generally Judaism is more in line with Islam than Christianity or other religions. Although obviously there's theological, and the Quran says a bunch of statements that we don't agree with, and there's dispute over, Isaac or Ishmael and different issues. But generally, in terms of 7 Noahide laws, Islam's doing pretty good. Christianity, you have the question of idol worship. Is belief in Jesus, not only belief in Jesus, but is the person through their belief in Jesus committing idol worship? And that's, as I said, disputed among the sages. And I might do a whole stream on that. Just there's a whole section of the Talmud, and there's thousands of years of sages from the inception of Christianity till today that's still disputed, with different sages having vastly different opinions on the issue. And I did put the link in the chat. If someone did want to come on, I'll allow that. And I'm just going to keep on reading through. So is Christianity idolatrous? And saying that's a dispute among the sages, and it depends what you mean idolatry. And then it might depend on the sect of Christianity. So, okay, are Jehovah's Witness idolatry? Probably no one would hold that Jehovah's Witness are idolatry. And, we might disagree whether Jesus had an elevated status or was even a prophet. But the fact that they worship Jehovah, not Jesus, puts them so that they're not idol worship, versus, even forms of Catholicism or Eastern Orthodox where they actually worship Jesus. basically as like a Hindu deity where they have statues and flowers and incense and mantras, where Jesus would actually be worshipped as a deity. And even within that, you might have different varying opinions of whether that is idol worship or not. And, if someone wants to come on and discuss that, we can. That's really a topic for a whole show. And you could go over thousands of years of sages and different regions and questions. So does God expect Israel to be a theocracy? So that's a pretty political issue. I did a stream with Brundle and Babs on my channel, Babylonian Hebrew, about the Pew data statistics and the survey, and there's a decent amount of Israel that does want it to be a theocracy, but most Jews do not want Israel to be a theocracy. Within the religion, it's unclear what's going to happen. Obviously, the Bible predicts the ingathering of the Jews to Israel. Maimonides and the sages lay out the ingathering of the Jews into Israel as one of the preconditions for Messiah to come, but it's unclear what's the nation state of Israel going to look like. Are we going to return to the Davidic monarchy and the caste system of Kohanim and Levium and the Besdin, or are we going to have like a secular democracy? And so that's pretty unclear, and it's almost directly Israeli politics, and you can see there's political parties that have opinions on that. Keep on going through. Would World Jewry benefit from having a hierarchical order of seniority for rabbis? I have in mind a National Rabbi, County Rabbi, a City Rabbi, a Town Rabbi. Out of all the National Rabbis of the world, you could even have a Pope Rabbi, so to speak, perhaps even using the rules of the Papal Conclave to choose one. I have in mind a 5-year term. So Israel does have a system similar to that with a chief rabbinate and different levels where you could vote for your mayor, rabbi, and like every rabbi has every township has 2 rabbis, an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi. And like in America, we have Reform, Orthodox, and conservative or progressive, Reconstructionist. In Israel, it's basically ethnic. If you're Ashkenazi bloodline, you have an Ashkenazi rabbi, and if you're Sephardi or Eastern, you use their rabbis, and denomination doesn't matter. It's more ethnically based, and they have that system, and generally the Torah world has rejected that. In Europe before World War II, we had a system similar to that where usually the state conferred a chief rabbi and there were local rabbis. So that historically, till the rise of America, was how most Jewish communities work, that the state, like Poland, as I mentioned, my debate with Eric Stryker and other videos, set up this very nice system that allowed the Jewish population to flourish and increase there. And that largely gave us self-rule, where we did have that type system where you had, the head council of rabbis that spoke directly to the Polish nobility. And then you had regional rabbis and synagogues and courts that, dealt with the people. And most through Europe and even England, we have a chief rabbi. And then America, basically we have a capitalistic competitive model of theology where you anybody could become a rabbi. You don't even have to be legally Jew to be a rabbi. You could be a Christian. You could open up a synagogue. You could start recruiting Jews. It's a free country. You could compete. You could open up your institute right next to a synagogue, and Jews compete. There's multiple different organizations, conservative, Reform, Orthodox. Within those, there's multiple competing organizations of Hasidic, and even within the Hasidic, you have multiple competing Hasidic sects, and that's the American model. And actually, like Rabbi Schlesinger in Hungary had said that he liked the American model of competitive, open competition for the pulpit, for the heart of the Jewish people. And Israel has a more hierarchical system, like she's questioning. So there's no definitive Jewish opinion on that, although we could go further in depth if someone wants to ask further in the comments after I post this, or join the chat. And that's a deep topic, and it's completely relevant to modern day American Jewish politics and Israeli, where like in America, you're not going to have that hierarchical structure. So would having a register of Jews be useful for keeping track of members of the tribe in diaspora and also for imposing standards of behavior, since they could then be struck off the register, so to speak, if they misbehave or do not conform to minimum standards of observance? So generally Jews would probably oppose a register just because what they're going to do with it. Israel even has considered trying to make a register of World Jewry for like marriage law and mamzeris or kahanim and different issues. In America, there would probably be vast oppositions. Say that's the difficulty of Israel versus America. Where in Israel, most Jews support an ethno-state, as we're in America, most Jews support multiculturalism. And any registry, so if an internal Jewish organization wants to put you on a registry for whatever reason, for orthodoxy, you say, oh, can you get married to this person within orthodoxy, and they have their own registry of considering who's a Jew, who's halakhically a Jew or not. But like a government one, and there's federations like that conduct surveys and estimates of Jewish populations, although there's no official control. I mean, Jews are American citizens and so to say are free to do as they please within or without the Jewish community. So generally I would say there'd probably be opposition to such a registry, although they would have use. And then saying, what are you going to do with that? And saying the purpose of the registry is to prevent intermarriage, basically. Like in Israel, the main purpose of the registry would be who has good enough lineage to marry with each other. So that's one of those things to American Jews and people in the West, liberal West, would be a big issue. Like you want to make a list so you could control who could get married to who. And so within the religious Judaism, there would be value to such a list and to keeping kosher marriages or not. But generally in America, that would probably be disapproved. And even Israel, that's a very big issue with what about you'd have like returning to like a caste type system. And striking people off the register. Like if you're in a Hasidic group, you follow the rules. Sometimes some Hasidic groups, you even have to sign a document, or even just Orthodox schools, that you're going to keep a certain set of rules. And they say, oh, you have a TV in your house, or like you went to a movie, this and this, you're not part of our group anymore. You didn't conform to the standards. So people could voluntarily do that, but I doubt anyone would want anyone in position of power making those decisions. King Kafnis, how much money do I have to pay to be a Kohen? No amount of money can make you a Kohen. It's an inherited position. If you had a daughter, your daughter could marry a Kohen, and then your grandchildren would be Kohanim. That's the only way. Okay, would World Jewry benefit from having some form of quality control in terms of the behavior if some of this behavior, particularly among liberal assimilated Jews, provokes anti-Semitism? So, no, I mean, generally not. I'm saying people have free will and stand before judgment in God. And a Jew is a Jew from a heretical standpoint, that if their mother's a Jew, they're a Jew regardless of their behavior, and you can't erase negative, bad performing Jews from the roster due to their bad behavior. You could reject them from your community. If you had a synagogue or a school, you'd say, okay, I don't want this person participating in synagogue with me. I don't want this person, kids in my school, so to say, but you can't erase them from the Jewish people. That generally breaks the principles of the religion of being just a hereditary status. If you're born a Jew, you're a Jew, regardless of your sins. You can't sin so badly that you're no longer a Jew anymore. Okay, I'm just trying to check the chat. I'm not sure if someone's talking to me, if Bats in the Barbell or Bork Solomon, if you're talking to each other or talking to me. So if I have a clear question, just make a note, like Duvid, or like ask the rabbi, and make sure to directly answer it. Okay. So should Jews object if the British government banned usury and reintroduced slavery? So that interesting, it connected to the 7 laws of Noah, that the nations are required a system of righteousness, a court system to implement that system of law, but it doesn't say what that system of law is. And historically, God forbid, we supported, the Jewish people historically supported many nations that had slavery. I mean, we ourselves had slavery in ancient Israel. We were slaves in Egypt, obviously. The Greeks have slaves. Babylonians had slaves, the Romans have slaves. Some people think that Jewish slavery continued up until maybe even the 15th century. And, God forbid, someone like Eric Streicher and their complaints that there could, God forbid, still be Jews involved in the slave trade till today. I haven't seen any solid evidence. And if there is a random Jew as a slave trader, I oppose that. But that slavery existed into the till the Enlightenment is probably pretty likely in even parts of Spain and Southern Europe and North Africa. And it's conceivable theoretically that you could have a righteous system that included slavery. Although I'm just saying from a theoretical Judaic halakhic perspective in the past. So now we've gotten rid of slavery, we don't hold slavery, we shouldn't move back in that direction. But if you just theoretically, if you want to compare, can you have a righteous society that includes slavery? So obviously the Bible would say yes, although maybe the sages over generations say that slavery is never going to happen again. You can't have a righteous society with slavery. And that even might be a dispute among the sages, which would be an interesting topic for more discussion. In terms of usury, usury was very popular in Europe, and some Jews left European countries historically because of laws against interest charging, and generally the rabbis negotiated a deal with the Christian authorities over interest rates, over how much we could charge, and the nature of usury, because we were sanctioned by the government to be moneylenders, as moneylending was largely illegal among the Christians, and the Jews had the specific task of being moneylenders, usurers. And we debated that and negotiated those with given European countries really till like 200 years ago, that the Jewish community would have tried to negotiate a deal and say, okay, we're Jews, we're money lenders, that's what we do. And you've tried to negotiate the best deal. Obviously in Islamic countries, they didn't have usury. Jews weren't allowed to do usury. And so it could be, similar to your 7 laws of Noah, where you could have different societies with different systems. That Jewish involvement in usury is largely a phenomenon that came to place in Europe in the rise of banking, and specifically with the Catholic money lending laws. And I think they say it was actually Rabbeinu Gershon who is famous for outlawing polygamy for Ashkenazic Jews, that also negotiated with the church some of the original money lending laws. And I mean, even Charlemagne, I think, had looked at the role of Jews playing in money lending. So it's an issue of a lot of research that, and even the Talmud debates usury, whether generally we rule that you can charge non-Jews interest, but there is an opinion in the Talmud that you shouldn't charge non-Jews interest. And so it's an issue to think about and how you set up a society. But yes, Jews could function in a society without usury. Look at the Jews in the Islamic countries. Let's check the chat. Baruch Solomon, who I think is Claire's friend, and if her yeshiva comes back on. So he's asking me, what's my Jewish affiliation? Orthodox, Reform, Haredi yeshiva, but I don't look Haredi. I'm a Baal Tshuva. My mother was kind of like secular Reform Jew who married a non-Jew. I had a Reform bar mitzvah, and then after high school, I went to Israel and studied in ultra-Orthodox schools, including some of the best, Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem, and Or Sameach I started in, and then I went to Borough Park, and I was in Hasidic yeshivas, and like Karlin Stolen, and Bobov, and Sklen, and you served famous Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, and drove Rebbes and rabbis. You can see on my YouTube page. Although, yeah, I never classified myself as an Orthodox Jew, although I learned in their schools. And generally, I like the sages. I study Torah, and like the Lubavitch Rebbe said about sectarianism, are you Reform, Orthodox, Conservative? And the Lubavitch Rebbe said on a few different occasions, labels are for suits. Everybody falls short in their duty. If you look at it, the commandments, everybody falls short. So the label Orthodox, Conservative, Reform is really just a demarker for living in a Christian society. And as I said, in Israel, you don't have Orthodox, Reform, Conservative. You just have Ashkenaz or Sephardi. And if your bloodline is Ashkenaz, whether you're ultra-Orthodox or completely secular, you use the Ashkenazic rabbi and the Sephardi rabbi. It's a bloodline thing if you're completely secular or ultra Haredi, you use the rabbi based on your ethnicity, Jewish ethnicity. So Claire's back in the chat. I'm not sure if I put the hangout in the link if someone's on. So I'm halfway through her questions. He's, Baruch Solomon, how do I get from being a mirror to? I went back home where I came from, and where I came from, there's an Orthodox community, but because of my being from a mixed marriage and you're part of a larger secular world, I don't really fit in there. So you're just location. Saying if I'd stayed in Israel, I might have largely amalgamated and assimilated into the Orthodox world. And in Brooklyn, I'd semi-assimilated into the Hasidic world. But when I came back to Detroit, I had to kind of go my own path and try to chart my own path and territory. And so it just kind of worked out the way it worked out without necessarily great forethought or planning to the best of my ability. That, you can't really be part of an Orthodox community if there is no Orthodox community. Or, if the Orthodox Jews around you have their community set up in a certain way that makes it hard to you work together with guarding sectarianism differences. And anyone who follows me on YouTube could see I have over 1,000 videos of all sorts. I work together with basically every major Jewish group in Michigan, from secular to ultra Orthodox. And how they think about me, you got to ask them. Okay, so in the description of the second part of the questions, starting with should the third temple be built? And obviously, Orthodox Jews, that was a part of reform. One of the first things they got rid of was reference to the rebuilding of the temple. And but in the prayer service, it's part of Jewish belief in Messiah and resurrection of the dead and the rebuilding of the temple. So within those believers who believe in the rebuilding of the temple, then the question is, should we actively participate? And like I said, the Lubavitch Rebbe, who followed Maimonides, who said there was a process that before the temple could be rebuilt, based on an understanding of the words of the prophets, that if someone wanted a different stream or to really get into looking at the words of the prophets, but the first, we need world peace and universal recognition of the same God before the temple could be rebuilt. And you can't rebuild the temple before that, although there are some schools in Israel that do want to go straight into using the Israeli government to rebuild the temple. And there's politics. And to some extent, if Israel, the government, generally does not favor that and is against it, and it's only small minority sects. But in fantasy thought, if Israel wanted to retake that territory, dismantle the Dome of the Rock and rebuild the temple, we might be able to do it, although it might cause World War III and Islamic backlash. So that's the center of, if you understand the world politics through the prism of Jerusalem and the temple, you could look at that and drive quite a bit of world politics. So Levi's, the conflict between Sephardim Haredim, Ashkenazim Haredim. You could see my stream with Babylon and Hebrew, where we go over the Pew statistics. So generally, there's segregation. So there's not necessarily conflict because of segregation. And that's why you have Ashkenazic rabbi and a Sephardic rabbi, and you just go to the one you are. And you might live in separate sections of town. And, the political levels, people vote their race to some extent, saying whether you're Orthodox or Haredi. So if you're a secular Jew, you might be like Labor or one of the Ashkenazic secular parties, but if you're a secular Mizrahi, you're more likely. Even Netanyahu is at the head of the Likud, but generally, Likud is made up of more Eastern Jews. And if you're Orthodox, you have United Torah Judaism for the Ashkenazic and Shas for the Sephardim. So there's pretty direct segregation. So how will King Kafnis, how will Israel survive the optics of animal sacrifice if we rebuild the temple? People might embrace it and saying if it's done properly, who knows? The temple will be built in our lifetime, and you'll be, everybody, hundreds of millions of people on the holidays will be watching the priest in Jerusalem sacrificing animals, and rabbis will be singing beautiful songs, and rabbis will be giving sermons. So it'll be up to us if we do go down that road to explain it to the nations. And the Talmud says Sukkah, the nations would actually come to bring sacrifices in the temple, and saying if God willing in our lifetime the temple's rebuilt and the temple's open for business, just like the people visit the Kotel today, presumably they would be coming offering animals to be sacrificed. And you would see on news Angela Merkel just went to Yad Vashem and was in Israel, and Trump. And so you'd see on the news like Angela Merkel just brought a goat to the temple to be sacrificed, and so who knows how that might work out. It's an interesting thought experiment. But thanks for the question, Mr. Kofness. Okay, has Rabbinic Judaism served Jewry better than Temple Judaism? So I mean that's you can't really better or worse. I mean saying obviously the Romans slaughtered, according to our estimates, the internal Jewish estimates, over 90% of the Jewish population basically was died off from battle with the Rome. So it wasn't an active choice to go from Rabbinic Judaism to from Temple Judaism to Rabbinic Judaism. It was historical factors and war, and if you religiously, theologically, the decrees of God. So better or worse, but and it's somewhat a machlokas, a dispute between Nachmanides and Maimonides, the two different famous rabbis of whether Rabbinic Judaism is just a temporary replacement for Temple Judaism, and the whole purpose of Rabbinic Judaism is just to hold us together till we reform the temple cult and you reestablish the kingdom of David and the priestly class, or whether you take like Maimonides, a more dispensational approach, that God had a different form of worship in mind, that when the temple stood, God desired sacrifices, but now the temple's not standing, God desires prayers. So it's a pretty theologically debated opinion, even among the sages. Bearing in mind the sex scandals of the Catholic Church that are now coming to light, would you say that all priesthoods corruptible? I mean, corruption, yeah, I mean, everyone's corruptible. There has to be checks and balances, but it doesn't mean you should get rid of the priesthood or the patriarchy or the systems. And we have to work, and people who follow the Orthodox Jewish news, and even like Luke Ford, when I first spoke to him, like all he did was press me about child molestation and stuff like that. It's an issue. It has to be dealt with. But I don't think people are going to want to dissolve the system due to it. Although some might. And, so I say almost all of her questions are pretty valid, good questions, and have, even among the sages, might have different answers to these questions. And should a corruptible priesthood be entrusted to maintain moralities? I mean, generally, Judaism doesn't entrust morality to a priesthood or to the rabbis. Just like I said, the 7 laws of Noah are binding upon all people without the intercession of the Jewish people. That's a direct commandment from God to all the people, the 7 laws of Noah. You don't need an intermediary Jew for that. And so the same thing with morality. You have laws, rabbinic courts, spiritual leaders to help with morality, but morality is our personal obligation to God, and whether the rabbis or priesthood is corrupt or not doesn't matter, with our personal obligation to be moral. And I mean, unfortunately, if your local rabbi or priesthood is corrupt, you still got to serve God. You still got to try to do the right thing within the bounds of the world that we live in. While any judiciary is also in theory corruptible, legal decisions are subject to argument, scrutiny, and appeal. If this is the case, would not the Islamic system of theocracy, i.e. Sharia, be better for maintaining morality? So, I mean, generally, Sharia law is closer is basically directly based off of Judaism, Abrahamic law, or Noah law, and the rabbinic law is taking different turn, but Sharia law is probably more in tune with the way Jews practiced thousands of years ago. And I don't necessarily see a connection or better or worse. I'm saying, like, we need good courts, we need moral and ethical people. If you could live in an Islamic just society, good. If you could live in a Western or any form of society and it's just, that's fine. It doesn't have to, it's not a better or worse. So, as I give the example many times in my streams and debates, that maybe have like Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Japan, very strict laws, strict punishments, but they could be implemented fairly where people know the laws and the punishment, and the people who administer it do it in a just manner, in the sense that they don't unfairly administer the law, and you might have very lenient society. So the key thing is that the rules are clearly defined and fairly administered, and the rules could stand differently in terms of the strictness or take on different issues and still be considered righteous. Would you agree that sexual corruption leads to moral corruption? I mean, yes, definitely, but doesn't mean that, God forbid, someone who's sexually corrupted is going to commit all other types of sins. I mean, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos said, "Mitzvah garat mitzvah, avera garat avera." A mitzvah leads to a good deed leads to another good deed. A bad deed leads to another bad deed. So any bad deed is going to lead to more bad deeds. Any good deed will lead to more good deeds. There could be a more natural connection between certain sins and other sins. So, I mean, if persons have a sinful path, chances are they're either going to use, a lot of rabbis say, based on the sage, you're either going up or down. So if you're living in sin and you're not trying to get rid of the sin, you're probably going to increase in sin no matter what the sin is. Would you agree that moral corruption leads to intellectual corruption? So, I mean, same basic answer. Corruption leads to more corruption, and it has to be checked. So so intellectual corruption will lead to moral corruption. Sexual corruption will lead to any form of corruption leads to more corruption, and we have to work on that and spot our faults and work on them. And famous, I think, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, the Miktav Eliyahu, gives the example of the battle line, where you have certain territory where you're fighting the battle against your good inclination versus your bad inclination, and you expand the line one way or the other. And so maybe like you're waking up late, or speaking lashon hara, bad things, or sexual immorality, or different things that one person might struggle with and another doesn't. And over a period of time, you kind of conquer that within your territory. But at the other time, the opposing army, the evil inclination might recapture that territory, and certain things are more further into your territory, so that you conquer. First you start, God forbid, speaking lashon hara, and then next thing you know, you start getting into fights. But the first step is lashon hara, and had you not get into speaking lashon hara, you might not start getting into fights, and so on and so on. Like sleeping late. First thing you sleep a little bit late. Next thing you know, you're missing prayers, or getting up earlier, get up a little earlier, and so on and so on. But that understanding, kind of like the battle line, that's either being, the evil inclination is either gaining or losing territory, and we want to keep on be constantly gaining and protecting territory on the side of righteousness. Is the West intellectually corrupt? I mean, large parts of it are. I think the U.S. system is largely broken. Even the whole system of the West is largely broken. I don't know if we're intellectually corrupt, if that'd be the right way to put it. If what the problems, maybe more morally corrupt. But we need to get ourselves back together. That's at the beginning. I was talking about the Khabib fight and kind of like the bankruptcy of the West. How Khabib could just come in here and destroy us on our own territory. So we need to regroup intellectually, morally, in all different types of manners. And that's why I'm streaming. Hopefully these conversations will help that. Is the sign of intellectual corruption the breaking of one's own rules while denying it? I mean, partly. In the Talmud, they refer to like a more heter, where someone gives a logical explanation to explain why we're sinning. That really we want to sin because we're just lustful and weak. And then after we've already committed the sin, we come up with these logical explanations to justify our behavior. To some extent, we're all hypocrites. Like I said, the Lubavitch Rebbe labels our pursuits. We all fall short. So in just recognizing we all fall short, and the task is much bigger at hand. Like I had Pirkei Avos on my channel, that the job is bigger than our ability to complete in our lifetime, but we still have to keep on working at it. So you recognize when we look in the mirror, we are corrupt. Although we could try to limit that, and like I said in the last example, with like the battle lines, where we see the values we espouse and our actual level and ability to keep those values we espouse, and it's not better to be consistent. It's better to try to be righteous than to be consistent. So I'm not going to espouse positive values because I fail in upholding, keeping those positive values. It's certainly much better to espouse positive values, even if we fail to keep up to them and be in that direction. But I mean, no one likes a hypocrite, so you could be humble, say less than you do, try to do a lot, say little. And there's a lot of good advice in like Perky Elvos for directly how to deal with this problem. And we could talk about this more. People leave comments in the comments or discussion, or a good topic for future streams. In the post-Christian West, is the post-Christian West guilty of idolatry, and could God be punishing the post-Christian West for nearly 1,800 years of idolatry and all who live in it, including observant Jews, for not performing the religious duty of warning Gentiles against idolatry? You would say, Jewish theology, theologians might argue, will be punished for the greater sins of society, that like Noah, society became corrupted, and society will be punished for the majority. And saying we're largely secular, and so it's not like the ancient world where we had idols. Although in modern days, a lot there might be idols in terms of celebrity, or idols in terms of money, love of power. So esoterically, you might consider those things forms of idolatry that we need to worry about. And said warning, even in terms like we need to warn the nations or the goyim. Generally, the Jewish attitude would be we have to have proper conduct, and there's a correlation between the conduct of the Jews and the conduct of the nation. So if the Jews are righteous, the nation will be righteous, and by acting, the best way to get people to be righteous and follow the ways of the righteous is for us to ourselves act righteous. And we believe in prayer and God controlling the hearts and minds of people. So you want to give a theological frame to understanding these questions. First, we could talk about the larger secular Jewish and try to give a secular frame to this also. But so here I'm focused on the general theology of the majority of the sages. So is feminism the cause of sexual, moral, and intellectual corruption of the West, as well as gender confusion and gay rights? So cause and effect is hard to tell. I talked about that with JF in terms of liberating women to make their own decisions of their sexual partner. What came first? They maybe all came together with the Enlightenment and the emancipation of the Jews, and the emancipation of slavery, and the emancipation of women. In terms of that, and should we legally force back in to tribal times? It's unlikely that we're going to move backwards, or it's possible. And saying that we should try to be moral to the best of our ability. You could support feminism, so I support equal pay for equal work. I support women being allowed into all institutions and open to all jobs. Although traditionally, in this thing, are you libertarian? Do you want to go back to penalties for adultery? And it's what we said about the 7 laws of Noah. Can one country have the punishment for adultery be execution, and another country have no penalty for adultery? Like in America, America legally, there's absolutely nothing done wrong with adultery. The only thing about adultery is it's ground for divorce, and it might play in a factor for custody rights or divvying up property, but there's no crime of adultery, and there's no punishment for adultery. Although that's changed. So as opposed to maybe an Islamic country where the punishment might be death by stoning for adultery. So according to my understanding of the 7 laws of Noah, both of those could be just societies because it's known. So if you're in America, we know the law saying adultery is not a crime. A woman in America could feel free to commit adultery, or a man to commit adultery, and not be punished by the government. They might ruin their family and their relations, and guilt in heaven, but the government not interfering, as opposed to an Islamic country where they might deemed that punishable by death. So you know what you're signing up for, so to say, when you're a member of a certain nation. And as long as the laws are clearly delineated and all people know about them and they're administered fairly, you might be able to take different issues and have different societies that have different takes on those issues. I would have, Claire unfortunately had computer problems. So I've finished all of her questions. I mean, just a brief answer. And so hopefully at least Claire or anyone else interested will be able to see my answers to them. And if any Jews or rabbis come across the stream and want to discuss this more, I'm open to discussing this more, or any non-Jews or anybody. I'm always thinking about these issues. And, I met Claire through the streamosphere and Intelligent Woman across the Atlantic. And, I'm sure if her connection was here, we could probably go on for hours talking about this. But whatever, her connection died out. So maybe she'll respond or come up with more questions, and we could talk about this more. And really, you could have done like a whole stream on any one of these questions, and books and papers, and really get into what the sages over generations have said on these different issues and different sages across the world, versus like polling and demographic data, and just secular Jewish scholars and leaders of federations and organizations, or wealthy prominent Jews, politicians might have their own take on these issues separate from the sages. That it's all be interesting to read about. So just look at the historicity. What's mass surveillance effect on hypocrisy? So I've mentioned that the change in technology. So I mean, Kabbalistically, they say the garments of the soul are thoughts, action, and speech, and that the people, Jews who were in synagogue for the high holidays, it's in our liturgy. God knows everything we do, think, and say. It's all recorded in the book, and we're judged for it. And karma is a fact. Everything we do, everything we think, every desire of our heart, that's permanently recorded in a book, and God judges us based on it. So, so there might be a video, there might be computer, there might be recordings, technology might be getting better. But if you're a believer, you say, God even knows my thoughts. And then just on a practical level, you say, well, I mean, look at like ISIS or something, like live streaming horrible violence and stuff like that, or even Facebook and the alt-right and deplatforming that, no, I mean, generally human nature trumps embarrassment, and that people think short-term and not long-term, and will put up silly things of themselves and even actively record and promote themselves doing stupid things in the short term. So the technology doesn't seem to intrinsically in itself be improving human behavior. Claire, can someone count the number of Lashon Hara in the Senate judiciary hearings? Unfortunately, even the rabbis that supported Kavanaugh, there's like 1,000 Orthodox rabbis that signed papers supporting Kavanaugh, and he was mentioning the concept of he said, she said, or even females testifying or besmirching the reputation of a person without proper evidence. And me and Claire, that was our second Ask the Rabbi stream where we went over the laws of Lashon Hara, and I'm glad we did. And I encourage anyone to watch that stream if they're not familiar with the laws of Lashon Hara, or looked into it, and just keeping proper speech and not saying things that we shouldn't. Brundle, here, Brundle, you want to come back on? I put the link in the chat one last time, and otherwise I'm probably going to end the stream pretty soon. So Brundle, what's the right age to teach your son chess? He's probably old enough already, probably 5 or 6. I mean, if like Piaget's, there's different theories of child development. Freud was popular. Now Piaget is probably the most popular, the French child development theorist, and probably 5 years old, because there's only 6 pieces with simple geometric patterns. So even at 5 years old, chances are your son will be able to understand the rules of the game, and just that there's different pieces that move according to different geometric patterns, and understanding the concept of checkmate. So if you could take a king and a queen versus a king and demonstrate the simplest checkmate. That's how I usually teach kids. And I'm going to plan to start streaming Fridays and talking about chess pedagogy, a little bit. But if you could, if your son could understand the concept of checkmate, he could start playing and he'll get better very quickly. And the earlier you teach him, he'll have clear thought, and your son might even start beating you. So if you teach him now at 5, like by the time he's like 8 or 10, he might start beating you, because sometimes it's relatively simple. What we think about in chess, there's no huge deep thinking. It's just simple geometric patterns. And so I encourage you to teach your son chess already. He's old enough. Claire, technically, is still a crime in U.S. and some states, surely. Yeah, it might be, but I don't think it's punishable. And it might be like some of these old laws in the books, like women driving after sundown or something. There's a lot of old laws in the books that aren't enforced. But I mean, generally, there's no punishment in the U.S. for adultery. But yeah, some states might still have on their book laws for it. But I can't think of in recent times the last time a woman was punished for adultery other than grounds for a divorce, or how that might affect the monetary settlement of the divorce. Eric W. Most modern academic biblical scholars ascribe to the documentary hypothesis multiple authors from different eras of Torah. Doesn't this contradict Orthodox belief in Mosaic authorship? I mean, generally, yes. There are some Orthodox apologists that will try to accept the multiple documentary hypothesis that really came out of Germany like 150, 200 years ago, and still believe in divine authorship of the Torah. But I mean, generally, if you mean Orthodox in saying that the Orthodox means Orthodox because Orthodox believe that Moses is the literal word of God and the prophecies are true. So, I mean, generally that you're going to have to reject any archaeological interpretation. So that's why when I was talking with Claire and trying to set the framing for it, where you want the frame as a Jew within the belief of the religion, or you want like a holistic picture where you're using the tools of archaeology and history and science all together to try to understand the Jewish religion. So today I was trying to give a more as a believer perspective, and saying as a believer, you could weigh different factors and say, okay, like as if you're a born Jew and say, okay, even if Judaism is not true, I still love my religion and my culture and practice and do the rituals. And, you have, no one, as Luke Ford says, no one gets kicked out of synagogue for being an atheist. To some extent, that, as long as you follow the societal community rules, no one's really going to press you about your belief. However, the doctrine of what we're supposed to believe has been clearly delineated in our text and by our sages. To post-liberal age, abide by the law of the land, I know, but what laws would your ideals laws look like? So I mean, that's why I'm saying that I'm a multiculturalist, so different countries and societies will have different laws. And to me, that's how it should be. And, to me, in America might be a certain exception where I think even within America, you could have different sections like zoning. You could have like New York City, where different sections of town could to some extent be governed by different laws. So I don't have, like ideal laws are just morals, ethics, so okay, you should care for the poor. Can you have a just society that doesn't care for the poor type thing? But I mean, can you have a just society where there's no punishment for adultery? Can you have a just society where the punishment for adultery is death? Maybe both of those are possible. And, can you have a society based on evolutionary capitalism where the weak get weeded out, and other socialist countries that have a strong safety net and large government? So from my perspective, that's within the free will of the people and the nations, and God has a system where people have free will, and the results will look different for different people, and righteousness is calculated according to a different equation. Yeah, I'm going to say that I recommend chess highly. Chess is, historical. Its game's been around for thousands of years. And chess is, they say like 20% of the world plays chess. Chess is very popular. It's competitive. A lot of schools have teams. Chess is almost a sport, to some extent. Like for a board game, you're looking like they have, I forget, like in the Olympics, like they added like certain like gymnastic events where like they're like waving those things and saying, but chess is almost considered a sport. You know, I don't think you have any other type board game intellectual endeavor like chess that that society would hold up to such a high level that it's almost considered like a sport. Okay, so I think I went through all the questions. I'm sorry Claire's internet didn't work out. I know it's late there. She's in London, so it's probably early in the morning there. And actually, it just looks like my roommate just pulled up, so it's probably a good time to stop the stream anyways. And, so Claire, you could respond in the comments or message me on Facebook, and maybe if there's enough, we could do another stream and delve more into one of these issues. If you want to specifically talk about Christianity and idol worship, and I'll research and have my facts, down so we could talk about the different sages and to take any of these issues and really delineate what the sages have said over generations and how the Jewish community has taken different approaches to these questions. But thanks everybody. Thanks Claire for doing this stream. Sorry your internet went down, and Brundle for coming on and sharing this, and everyone who joined. I really appreciate it. Be blessed. I might do another stream this week. I have some time off. I've been meaning to do a stream on the like a public study session on the history of Christian theology. So I might do that this week. Pardon me. A little cough, getting cold here, so a little cold and vaping. But Brundle, if he wants to try to schedule me from debates or Halsey or something, I would look forward. I might appear on the stream, although I don't have any direct plans right away. So Friday I'll be streaming from the chess club. We got some kind of award ceremony. See then. Hanukkah will be coming up. I'll be streaming some Jewish events, and anyone wants to message me or talk or something, I'm probably pretty willing to stream. I got a decent amount of free time almost every day that if it's interesting to do, I could probably do it. So I'm going to log off. Thanks everybody for watching. Shalom, blessings, and we'll talk again. Unless you want to sing a song. I got 10 people here. Maybe my roommate's going to come in. So I'm going to end the stream, but I wouldn't mind singing a song. I'm trying to think of a good song, like Lo Isa Goy El Goy Cherev, Lo Yilmedu Oid Milchama, Lo Isa Goy El Goy Cherev, Lo Yilmedu Oid Milchama. The words from Isaiah that nation shouldn't rise up against nation, learn war no more. And okay, so take care everyone. Thanks a lot.